The flames of war had burned across 1,000 worlds. But on the barren moon of Kepler 442b, one fire still flickered in defiance. Commander Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the crater, his weathered hands gripping the railing of the observation deck. Behind him, the underground bunker stretched for miles beneath the dusty surface. 300,000 souls lived down there now. Humans, yes, but also Velthri with their blue-scaled skin, the insect-like Churix who clicked when they spoke, and even a handful of the tall, silent Orvani who had abandoned their own kind to stand with Earth. The Alliance of Free Worlds, they called themselves. But everyone knew the truth. This was humanity's last stand. Marcus was 63 years old. He had fought in the First Contact War when the Dominion had come to Earth with promises of partnership and left with half the planet's population in chains. He had led the liberation of Mars Station when everyone said it was impossible. He had watched 3 wives die and buried more friends than he could count. His body was more machine than flesh now, with a synthetic lung and a cybernetic left arm that sometimes ached in the cold. But his eyes were still sharp, and his heart still burned. "Commander," a voice called from behind him. He turned to see Kira Vasquez approaching, her military boots crunching on the loose gravel. She was young, maybe 25, born during the war. She had never known a time when humanity was not fighting for survival. "The council is ready for you." Marcus nodded and followed her into the bunker. The corridors were crowded with refugees from a dozen worlds, all of them displaced by the Dominion's advance. They parted as Marcus walked past, their eyes following him with something that looked like hope. He hated that look. Hope was a dangerous thing when the enemy had a fleet of 10,000 ships, and you had barely 200. The council chamber was a converted storage room, its walls lined with makeshift seats carved from rock. Representatives from every species in the Alliance sat in a rough circle, their faces lit by the glow of a holographic display showing the Dominion's latest movements. "They're coming," said Admiral Dexrow, a Velthri with scars running down one side of his face. His voice was calm, almost resigned. "The main fleet will arrive in 72 hours. We have no chance of victory in open battle." "Then we don't fight in open battle," Marcus said, stepping into the center of the room. "We make them come to us. Here, on this moon, where their ships can't maneuver and their numbers don't matter," a Churix representative named. Click 7 made a series of rapid sounds that Marcus's translator rendered as doubt. "The Dominion has conquered 600 worlds. They have never lost a ground campaign. What makes you think we can succeed where all others have failed?" Marcus looked around the room, meeting every set of eyes, every compound lens, every sensory organ that served as eyes. "Because they've never fought humans before. Not really. Not when we had something worth dying for." He walked to the holographic display and manipulated it with his cybernetic hand, bringing up a map of the bunker system. "We have 40 kilometers of tunnels down there. Choke points every 100 meters. Supply caches hidden in locations even I don't know. The Dominion likes clean victories. They like to overwhelm their enemies with superior firepower and watch them break. We're going to give them something different. We're going to give them a war that never ends." "You're talking about guerrilla warfare," said a soft voice. Marcus turned to see Ambassador Yellen, an Orvani who had defected from the Dominion 3 years ago. Her pale skin seemed to glow in the dim light. "The Dominion will not accept a prolonged engagement. They will simply bomb this moon from orbit until nothing remains." "Let them try," Marcus said. "We've buried power generators in the bedrock. Shields that can withstand anything short of a planet cracker. And even if they use one of those, they'll destroy the Nexus Gate in the process. The only stable wormhole in this sector. The only way to move their fleet to the inner colonies." Silence fell over the council. Marcus could see them processing his words, calculating the implications. "You're saying we're the cork in the bottle," Admiral Dexral said slowly. "I'm saying we're more than that. We're the symbol, Right now, across every occupied world, people are watching this moon. They're waiting to see if the Alliance can stand against the Dominion. If we fall, they lose hope. If we hold even for a month, even for a week, we show them that the Dominion can be stopped. Click 7 sounds were softer now, more contemplative. And if we hold for longer than a week? Marcus smiled, and there was something fierce in it. Then we become a legend, and legends have a way of spreading. The Dominion rules through fear. We're going to show the galaxy that fear can be conquered. The meeting continued for hours, with Marcus outlining defensive positions, supply rotations, and evacuation protocols for non-combatants. By the time it ended, his body ached and his synthetic lung wheezed with every breath. But when he walked back to his quarters, he noticed something different in the corridors. The refugees were no longer just watching him pass. They were standing straighter. Some of them were even smiling. Kira caught up to him near the entrance to the command section. "That was quite a speech, Commander." "It wasn't a speech," Marcus said. "It was the truth. The only weapon we have left. Do you really think we can win?" Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. In the harsh bunker lights, she looked impossibly young. She reminded him of his daughter, the one he had lost when the Dominion glassed New Beijing. "I think winning isn't the point," he said. "The point is showing up. The point is standing when everyone tells you to kneel. Humanity has been doing that since we first picked up sticks and rocks to fight things with bigger teeth than us. The Dominion thinks they know what they're dealing with, but they don't. They've never seen a species that fights harder when it's cornered. They've never seen what humans do when they have nothing left to lose." Kira was quiet for a moment. Then she straightened her spine and gave him a crisp salute. "Then I guess we'd better make it a fight worth remembering, sir." Marcus returned the salute. "That's all any of us can do." That night, he stood again at the observation deck, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the Dominion fleet was moving closer. 10,000 ships crewed by soldiers who had never known defeat. But down below, in the tunnels and chambers of this barren moon, 300,000 beings from a dozen worlds were preparing for war. And at the center of it all, holding them together like gravity holds a planet, was one old human soldier who refused to give up. The last flame. The final stronghold. Marcus Webb closed his eyes and made a promise to the ghosts of everyone he had lost. He would hold this line. He would show the galaxy what humanity was made of. And when the history books were written, they would remember that the Dominion's empire broke against a moon that should have fallen in hours, but stood for something greater than survival. It stood for defiance, for hope, for the stubborn, beautiful, infuriating will of beings who refused to accept that the darkness would win. The 72 hours passed like water through clenched fingers. Marcus spent every moment preparing, inspecting, encouraging. He visited every defensive position, shook every hand, and learned every name he could. When the Churek soldiers clicked nervously at their posts, he clicked back, a poor imitation that made them laugh. When the Irvani medics worked in grim silence, he thanked them in their own language, the words awkward on his human tongue, but sincere. By the time the Dominion fleet arrived, the moon of Kepler-442b was ready. The first wave came at dawn. Drop pods rained from the sky like metal tears, punching through the thin atmosphere and slamming into the surface. Marcus watched from the command center as thousands of Dominion soldiers emerged, their black armor gleaming in the starlight. "Hold positions," he ordered through the comm. "Let them come to us." The Dominion commander, a being named Executor Vierne, sent a message demanding immediate surrender. Marcus responded with a single word that his translator could barely render in polite terms. The battle began. It was brutal. It was bloody. It was everything Marcus had promised it would be. The Dominion soldiers poured into the tunnel entrances, expecting quick victory, and found themselves fighting for every meter. Human soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder with Velthari warriors, their different anatomies complementing each other in the tight spaces. Churek's engineers collapsed tunnels on enemy positions, then dug new paths through the rock with astonishing speed. Ovani snipers picked off Dominion officers with cold precision, their betrayal of their own kind complete and unforgiving. And through it all, Marcus moved like a ghost through the bunker, appearing wherever the fighting was thickest, his presence turning desperation into determination. On the third day, the Dominion brought heavy armor into the tunnels. Marcus had expected this. He triggered the seismic charges his engineers had planted weeks ago, and a kilometer of tunnel came down on the assault column. The Dominion lost 2,000 soldiers in an instant. On the seventh day, Executor Viren demanded a parley. Marcus refused. He sent back footage of his troops singing around campfires, their voices carrying songs from a dozen worlds, all of them somehow becoming one. On the 14th day, the first cracks appeared in the Dominion fleet. A destroyer captain defected, bringing his ship and crew to the Alliance. He said he had watched the defense of Kepler-4 42b and realized he was on the wrong side of history. More followed. On the 21st day, reports came in from occupied worlds. Resistance movements were rising. Inspired by the moon that would not fall, civilians were taking up arms. The Dominion was facing something it had never encountered, an empire in revolt. On the 30th day, Marcus took a piece of shrapnel to the chest. The medic saved his life, but barely. He was back in the command center within 12 hours, refusing to stay in the medical bay while his people fought. On the 45th day, the Dominion fleet began to retreat. Not a full withdrawal, but a repositioning. They were needed elsewhere. The fires of rebellion had spread too far. On the 60th day, the last Dominion soldier left the surface of Kepler-4 42b. Marcus stood at the observation deck, his chest still aching from his wound, and watched them go. Around him, the survivors cheered, their voices echoing across the crater. Humans, Velthari, Churix, Orvani, all of them embracing, crying, laughing. Kira found him there, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." Marcus nodded, but his eyes were distant. "This isn't over. The Dominion will regroup. They'll come back stronger. Maybe, but they'll never forget what happened here. And neither will anyone else." She was right, and Marcus knew it. The moon of Kepler-4 42b would become a legend, the place where the tide turned, the battle that proved the Dominion could bleed. In the years that followed, the war continued. It was long and hard, with victories and defeats on both sides. But something had changed in the galaxy. Hope had taken root, and hope was a stubborn thing. Marcus Webb did not live to see the end of the war. His wounds and his age caught up with him 3 years after the siege, and he died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by the people who had become his family. But by then, the flame he had kept burning had spread to 1,000 worlds. The Alliance of Free Worlds became the Alliance of Free Systems, then the Alliance of Free Peoples. Species that had spent millennia in isolation joined together, their differences becoming their strength. When the Dominion finally sued for peace, it was not to a single general or a single species. It was to a coalition of beings who had learned that the only true defeat was giving up. At the signing ceremony, the new leaders of the Alliance placed a small flame in a crystal container at the center of the table. It was a symbolic gesture, they said. A reminder of the old soldier who had held the line when everyone else said it was impossible. The last flame, they called it. The flame that refused to die. And in the histories that were written afterward, across every language and every world, the name Marcus Webb was remembered. Not as a conqueror or a hero in the traditional sense, but as something more important. He was the veteran who held the last stronghold, the leader who inspired planetary loyalty, the human who showed the galaxy that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else was more important. That was humanity's gift to the stars, not technology or resources or military might. Just the simple, stubborn belief that even in the darkest hour, One person standing tall could light the way forward. And that was enough. That was everything. Or was everything